Hi everybody. I just wanted to show you what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I'm going to get started on some tomato sauce and see how it goes. I've got a lot right now that are frozen from last year, so I want to open them all up, get them defrosted tonight, and then tomorrow I'll get started on it. So I'll let you see how many tomatoes I got, and then we'll look at it and see how much I've got. So there's all the tomatoes. So you can see how many I've got right now. I don't know how many pounds it is, but last year it was quite a few tomatoes. So all I did was just clean them up, slice them, the larger ones, and then throw them in a Ziploc bag, throw them in the freezer. I've got a lot of small ones here for cherry tomatoes. It's just a whole bunch of different types of cherry tomatoes. I've got Golden Sunrise, Tiny Tim, I think, were the other one, and some black cherries as well. And then the tomatoes, of course, the tomatoes are just a big mixture of different varieties that we had grown last year as well. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to do the tomato sauce today. It's a good job that we did put it in a box. Actually, we used a boot tray to put the tomatoes in while they were still frozen and defrosting last night. There's a lot of water in there. I'll give you a view of it in a second. There's also a lot of water in the bags of the tomatoes. And what that is just the extra water from freezing. It's frozen the water, now it's defrosted. It's in the Ziploc bag, so no concern about that, but we're just gonna pour all that off and go ahead and start processing our tomatoes. The advantage of freezing them is that you do get all that water and you can actually drain it off rather than having to boil it off later. If you want to reduce to a sauce, then it's easier to freeze them and then have it that way rather than boiling the water again later off, and you just end up boiling it off. So let me show you what I got. You know that water in the tray? Good job we used the boot tray last night. Now I've drained off all of the large tomatoes. I'm going to do them separately when I process them, only because the larger tomatoes, I'll use the skins and what I get out of the press, and I'm going to dehydrate them for a tomato powder, which I can use in any food going forward. But I can't imagine the amount that I got of water. That's probably a bit over, about 1.5 liters, I guess, of total water. The tomatoes for the cherry tomatoes, I'm going to process them the same way. I'm just going to process the skins and that slightly different, in that I'm not going to use them for a tomato paste, but I'm actually going to feed them to the chickens. So we'll go from there. So as you can see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bags of tomatoes, and they're actually still frozen too, even overnight. So there is still going to be a lot of liquid in there when I'm doing my tomato press, which is a Weston. Once I start getting the tomato extras, I guess we'll call them, the seeds and the skins out of the roller here, I'm going to reprocess them several times just to make sure I get all the juice out, and then we'll go from there. And I'll just set the camera up so you can get a good idea of that. So it's kind of hard to set up the camera so that you can actually get a view of it because I've got it from my back. But what I'll show you here is how we're going to process these. So this is a tomato press. You just take the raw tomatoes that you have, you pour them in the top. And again, there's going to be a lot of liquid because these are still frozen. I'll save the Ziploc bags, wash them out, and then we can reuse them later. Yes, there is a lot of liquid still coming out of that. So all we do is pop this in, pop these down, and give it a whirl. And this is actually going to start turning the grinder or the rotor that's in there. There we go. Oh, it's even forming ice. It's coming. There's ice coming out of the waste chute here. So we definitely will be processing that again. So I'll give you a better idea of how this is going to work. So this is the tomato waste, the seeds and the skins. And then the juice and the pulp is coming out through here into the bowl. And you'll see there's a lot of liquid in there right now. And that's a lot to do because of the freezing of the tomatoes as well. So you're getting a lot of the juice first. So what I'll do is I'll process these, I'll show you the end result, and then we'll go from there. And I'll show you that from the first processing of the waste, how much extra juice that we actually do get. So here's a better idea of how this works. So you can see here the waste on the left-hand side comes out, and that's all skins and seeds, and the pulp and the juice comes out here and falls into the smaller bowl here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reprocess all of that because it is very, very wet still. Some of the tomatoes themselves were still frozen. You can see I've still got a little bit of frost in there. All we do here is just turn this knob, and then the grinder, I guess it is. It's not really a grinder, it's just a rotor pops in, and the tomatoes go down into that and then come out the other end and doing dual purpose, the waste and the pulp. So I'll do all this one. I'll rerun the pulp that I've got over here from the waste, and then I'll show you what we've got in the end. So there's my pile of waste, and I did end up with 16 cups of juice. A lot of that's going to have to be reduced again though because of the extra ice in there from the freezing. So I'm going to redo this one here, and we'll just see how much more I get. So this is the waste that's run through once, and you'll notice that there's a lot more pulp this time as opposed to just liquid. We're going to mix this in, and I think it's probably about 4 cups into the liquid, and then we're also going to go ahead and reprocess the waste again, and I'll show you again the next time how much more we get. Okay, so I ended up with another 4 cups, and I ended up with a total of 24 or 26 cups in, actually I can check, 24 cups. 24 cups of sauce or liquid, which includes a lot of pulp and still some liquid from the tomatoes themselves. And I have this left over for waste. Well, now what you can do with this is dehydrate it into tomato powder. And then you can add the powder to anything that you want. So I'll do that later. Just in a regular dehydrator, you just I usually just flatten it out, dry it right out, and then crisp it up and throw it into a little coffee grinder that I have for herbs and stuff like that. Okay, almost cleaned up. I've got all of the sauce in my roasting pan. I ended up with 24 cups from the large tomatoes and 16 cups from the cherry tomatoes. A couple of tips. I wouldn't use frozen tomatoes in the tomato press. It's too much. They're too hard to use. They don't go down as easy. And wear slippers or shoes while you're doing this, and your arm is going to hurt afterwards. My arm's going to hurt tomorrow because that's a lot of turning on that press. And also, there was another tip that I wanted to give you, and I can't remember. So here's the result. I'm going to let this simmer in the roaster pan for a bit, just to reduce a little bit more, because there was a lot more liquid in the cherry tomatoes than in the larger size tomatoes. So we'll let that sit for a little while, reduce down maybe about a ½ an inch to an inch. I'll see what the texture is like and the thickness is like in a little bit. Then, oh yes, the other tip. The tip was don't do cherry tomatoes by themselves, because what happens is there's too many seeds to skin ratio, and they get all gooped up around the grinder, in the rotating grinder in the tomato press, and then it's harder to work, and it also doesn't work as well, so it's not crushing everything, and you have to either take it apart or you just have to suffer through it. I suffered through it until I got to the very end, and then I got frustrated and I took it apart, and it was just jammed with seeds. So there's my tips for this, and I'm going to let this simmer, get my jars out. Okay, so I'm just getting ready to can the tomato sauce. It has gone down a little bit, not by much, but that's enough for me. And I'm going to get this canned up, jarred up, and then put in my steam canner. So I've got 7 jars ready. I put 2 tablespoons of lemon juice in each because I don't know the pH of my actual jars. Of my actual tomatoes. I want to make sure that the pH is higher so we can water bath. And in this case, we're actually going to steam it. This is a steam canner. It's the same process as a water bath, except you don't use so much water. So I filled up the water to the level of the rack. Then I'll fill that up, put the lid on, and there's a gauge at the top that I follow. Once it hits the right pressure over here in the green, then I start my timing, and 45 minutes, I think, is the timing that we should do. So we'll go from there. Thanks. So I've got the jars all filled, and then what I'm just going to do is just going to wipe off the rims to make sure that there's nothing sitting there from the tomato juice when I was putting it in. It's definitely more of a tomato juice than it is a sauce because it is very thin. So I get these all cleaned off. You don't want anything impacting between the lid and the top of the jar. And then it's fingertip tight, not too tight. You don't want to go too tight because if you do too tight, then it might buckle the lid and might cause a improper seal. Just fingertip tight. These on here. Now I'm using a combination of some old rings that I had and also some new Bernardin. This is the type that I'm using. Bernardin lids, flats, and then the rings, I've had them from before. I don't use a lot of rings again. I will check them. If they're fine, then what I will do is I'll actually keep them. I'll keep them to use for dry goods and then go from there. So we're just going to actually take my lid off here. This is starting to steam up, you can see. And then I'm just going to take my jars. And this will hold 7. It's hard to do one-handed. So like I mentioned, the only advantage to this type of steamer, it's still the same length of time that you would use. The only difference is that you're not using an entire 14 gallons of water to fill up the canner to get it overflow over top of the lids. So there, we got 7. I'm going to put the lid back on. Make sure that it is snug, that it is tight. You can check on both sides here. And then what we'll do is we'll watch for the steamer. Once it gets up to this green section here, this is where it's set for our area. Then what I will do is I will then start the time. So we'll wait for that. And this is actually called a fruit saver. It's a little bit starting to get warm already. Okay, folks, and there's the end result. They did separate, which is okay. I'll just shake them back up when I want to use them. And we'll go from there. I did end up with 9 full quarts. One of them siphoned off quite a bit, so I'm going to use that one first. I'm not even going to let it seal. And then we're going to go from there. So thanks very much for watching.